So Salesforce, ticker symbol CRM, is a software company whose product primarily helps businesses unite their sales and marketing. The company serves a wide range of industries, including finance, healthcare, retail, and technology, and it was founded in 1999 and is headquartered in San Francisco. It has offices and employees around the world and is one of the largest and most successful customer relationship management companies in the world.
The games group, baby. We're all gonna get rich together.
Some of the numbers. The one that stands out the most by far is definitely the PE ratio. 486.46. That is insane. What I've been seeing a lot of people say is the PE ratio for this company isn't a big deal because they're reinvesting their earnings, and so their earnings are artificially really, really low. Speaking of their earnings per share right now is 0.28. Next quarter projected to go up to 1.36, and then next year projected to go to 5.65. Wow. No dividends, and with their fully growth, they reinvest a ton of their money. Their margins, they start out at 72.7 gross, and they go all the way down to 1.2 operating and 0.9 profit. What I was seeing like a Forbes article about why their margins are really low, it's because they're heavily investing in themselves. And they've been investing a lot into data centers and stuff like that, and so they've really been spending everything. So the general narrative that I've been seeing is that the PE ratio and these margins kind of go hand in hand, and they shouldn't be. There's no reason for concern that they're these numbers because they're reinvesting it into their business. Speaking of what they're reinvesting, their revenue $30 billion, and their current and quick ratio are both 1.1, so they're afloat. They have such a deep moat around them. I'll talk about more of this later in the Forest Five Forces, but people are really, really stuck to Salesforce. People will not leave. They have such good user retention. Now, the current price of it is 134.75, and it peaked at 299.69. So it peaked at basically 300. It's pretty far down, and this past year it's been down basically 50%.
The games group, baby. We're all gonna get rich together.
So macroeconomic conditions, fear and greed for some reason isn't greed, even though the Fed just raised the interest rates by 50 basis points. That is going to hurt Salesforce among other companies in the near future. Basically, last year in July, they bought Slack, which is basically a professional version of Discord used in businesses across the globe, and they bought it for about $27 billion. And so if you remember, their revenue is about 30 billion. So Slack is great in their space, and I think it's actually really good that they bought Slack because it helps Salesforce's secondary goal is to kind of bring businesses, departments together. And they actually bought like the industry standard messaging platform. Why it's down a lot recently. There's been a bit of a resignation party. Salesforce CEO Bret Taylor, who joined the company in 2016 and became a co-CEO just 1 year ago, stepped down about 2 weeks ago to, quote, get back to his entrepreneurial roots. Also, Slack's founder and CEO Stewart Butterfield is also leaving, and Slack's product chief as well as Slack's senior vice president in charge of marketing, brand, and communications are departing. You might wonder why all of a sudden departures. Well, Salesforce pays their executives in stock, more so than almost any other company in the Fortune 500. 85% of executive salaries were awarded stock options, and the stock is down 50% this year. And then these executives are basically sitting there like, well, I want to be making money. Salesforce co-founder and CEO Marc Benioff has vowed to try to win these executives back. Now, in my opinion, I feel like it's really hard to convince somebody to change their mind. So I think it's pretty unlikely that he's going to be able to win them back, but maybe. Who knows? Only time will tell. There's a ton of companies that use Salesforce, right? Because any company needs customer relationship management, and every company needs interdepartmental communication. So the companies that use Salesforce is such a wide variety, including like Spotify, Amazon, Toyota, Macy's, T-Mobile, and even the American Red Cross. Plenty of different competition. They've got Oracle's NetSuite, they've got Microsoft Dynamics 365, Pipedrive, and they also have Monday.com. Lots of different competitors. Those are just a few, but they have such a significant moat, and I'll talk a little bit more about it with the Porter's Five Forces.
The games group, baby. We're all gonna get rich together.
So the Porter's Five Forces, I thought about the competition a lot. I ended up going with high competition because it's such a competitive space. Even though they're dominant in that space, there are tons of other options all fighting for market share. I gave a very high threat of entrance because every company has customers, even B2B businesses. They also have to communicate amongst themselves interdepartmentally. A customer relationship management tool would be really useful to them. A lot of those companies, though, they kind of just make their own internal tool. And so Salesforce has the problem of like a free tool coming along, such as Google Sheets, being able to kind of do it not as good as they can, but good enough where it's no longer worth the cost. For supplier power, I gave low supplier power because they have their own data centers, and that space is really, really competitive. I think the prices are just going to be driven really low because there's no real way to kind of distinguish your server farm or your data center. So when they're buying them, it's going to be the lowest cost one, you know. I actually think low buyer power and low threat of substitutes because their software is so good. People have gotten so used to it, and from what I've seen, some of the things online that they said was actually a negative of Salesforce is it has a big learning curve. But I think that actually plays into it because their users, once they achieve that learning curve, they get over that learning curve. They don't want to have to re-go through that process again with another company or with another product. They want to keep using what they're familiar with. And also, they put the statistic everywhere on their website. They have like 96% of their customers were satisfied with their ROI from Salesforce. I think it shows basically their customers are not going to be leaving anytime soon. So I would give them a low pirate power because if they up the price, customers are like, it's not that big of a deal. They're not gonna switch if they change their price a little bit.
The Gaines Group, baby. We're all gonna get rich together.
So the analysts are projecting it to go to around 200 in the next year. So it's at 134 right now. To go up to 200 is almost 50% gain. So they basically think in the next year it's going to fully recover what it lost this past year. And I even saw some people saying as high in 1 year as $400 a share, which would be a 200% growth, pretty much 3xing their current price. I think that's a little optimistic. Personally, I'm a little bit less optimistic in the next single year. So the next single year, I have them at 160. In 5 years, I have them at 236, which is 12% per year. And in 10 years, I have them at 416.
The Gaines Group, baby. We're all gonna get rich together.
The reason why I'm not so optimistic is basically because I kind of foresee a recession with the inverted yield curve, the continuing rising interest rates, the inflation, all that. I'm not super optimistic. I think the Fed is going to keep aggressively tightening the interest rates. It's going to slow down, right? Basically, 160 I think is pretty reasonable. The reason why I think it's going to go up in general is because A, Salesforce is really good at what they do. They're such a dominant company. They have good financials. They still have their co-founder as the CEO. And I always like to see that because I feel like the founder is the one who built the whole thing, so you can rely on their leadership. Also, I think the price right now, I think is actually really good because those executives have been mass leaving. I think it scared a lot of people, and people may have sold, emotionally. I think those executives are important, right? But the market did overreact to them departing. Until someone even gets close to challenging them as the best, there's no reason not to hold.
We asked an AI to write a Python program to switch applications when you say, I am the Dragon Warrior. Here's what it does.
I am the Dragon Warrior.